So Andrew, we're just at about 6 o'clock. I'm sure that we'll have people continuing to join us as we move into the hour, but perhaps you'd like to kick us off with an overview of the plan for today and also to welcome our moderator.
Yes, I'd be happy to, Brian. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us this evening. I know it's getting late in the day for many of you, so appreciate you taking the time to be here. BISG board and staff have been evaluating the merits of a lot of different actions that we might take as the largest trade association in publishing in the US. And this is the first of several actions. We're grateful that you're here with us. BISG's mission is to create a more informed, empowered, and efficient book industry, and convening folks from all corners of the supply chain to have critical conversations like this more than meets that criteria. As I've said before, and we've said before as an organization, we at BISG are by no means experts on matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, and you know, I guess in some ways, regrettably, we haven't organized any events or conversations quite like the one we're having today before. But we all agree that a more diverse industry will benefit all of us, including the millions of people who read the books that we all spend our days and nights bringing to market. When confronted with a supply chain issue or an opportunity to draft and share best practices for the industry at large, we take action. We do that in three ways. We convene, we amplify, and hopefully we solve. Tonight is an opportunity, first and foremost, to convene members of the industry and amplify the important voices of those doing the critical work in an effort to solve where problems exist. And BISG as an organization is looking at what it could and should be doing here. And we'll have much more on that to come. We know change won't happen overnight, but BISG is we think, well positioned to partner with member companies, institutions, and like-minded organizations to collaborate on actions that improve where we stand as an industry. Tonight, we'll be hearing about actions underway at a number of different organizations, some of which may serve as models for your own company or collective, and we'll be hearing from members of the community. We have folks here on the call and in the audience from large and small publishers, distributors, service providers, retailers, and libraries, literary agencies, packagers, and other trade associations and nonprofits, all here to listen and learn from each other. I hope this goes without saying, but we'll say it to be explicit. Please know that this is a safe space for people to speak openly and honestly. We ask everyone to listen and communicate with the utmost respect for each other. On behalf of BISG, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our speakers this evening for taking time out of their schedules to share their perspectives on such a critical topic for the industry. We will be recording the video and presentations and publishing a summary on our website later this week, in addition to the diversity, equity, and inclusion resources that we've posted on our site. You'll find the link on our homepage at bisg.org. Logistically, the program is going to look like this. First, we'll have an introduction from our host for this evening, Tracie D. Hall, Executive Director of the American Library Association. Next up, we'll have several presentations of strategic action plans from business and trade associations. After that, we'll hear two presentations on what's working from a grassroots perspective. Following that, there'll be a panel discussion among our speakers led by Tracie. We will definitely leave time for questions and suggestions from the audience, which you are welcome to put in the Zoom chat tool along the way. Brian O'Leary, our Executive Director, will field those and pass those along to Tracie. BISG Vice Chair Kathleen Reid from Elsevier will provide a summary of the conversation. And finally, we'll hear some closing remarks from Kelvin Watson, Director of Broward County Libraries, and the BISG Board Treasurer. Well, conversations like the one we're having here tonight are incredibly important. We know that real change also needs action. I want to point out to all of you in the audience that BISG will soon begin the process of identifying board candidates for seats that will open up in 2021. If you know of someone you think would add important perspective to BISG's board, and that could be yourself, please let us know. You can find more information on the BISG website by clicking on the About button, where you'll find a link with information about the board nomination process. And now to formally kick off our town hall conversation, I'd like to welcome our host and moderator for the evening, Tracie D. Hall, Executive Director of the American Library Association. Tracie, welcome.
Thank you so much. And thanks so much to BISG. I'm grateful to have been invited to moderate and to witness this conversation. And before we kick it off, I'm going to just say a few prefacing words. Each day we make intentional and unintentional decisions about whether we will work for social justice or against it. After years in libraries and social services and arts administration, I have come to see inaction as actually working against the cause for justice. In my first address as ED to ALA's membership, I issued a call that we make an intentional choice to have the association's legacy be justice. By issuing that call, I meant for us to explore the construct of the library as both the vehicle and the driver of social justice. Honing in on our purposes today on one aspect of social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, I am led to ask, what is our responsibility to equity and inclusion when we consider that literacy and educational attainment are two of the key contributors to economic self-sufficiency, and that their absence contributes to the school to prison pipeline, to high unemployment, and to generational poverty? And we know that each of these things is being exacerbated by the twin pandemic of the coronavirus and the increase in visible displays of injustice. In libraries, as in the book industry, inequity in our ranks makes our work miss its mark. According to recent studies, only about 6.8% of the 300,000 individuals who identify as library professionals identify as Black. Only 8.6% identify as Latinx. Only 4.6% identify as Asian American or Pacific Islander, and less than 1% identify as Indigenous or Native American. Over 85% of librarians and library workers identify as white. The library and information services profession, its inability to reflect its widely diverse current and potential user base, limits its resonance, its reach, and even its credibility. That is why my fellow member and staff leaders at the American Library Association have prioritized the rapid diversification of the LIS workforce as one of our key priorities. And today, I want to issue that same challenge to BISG, to diversify the ranks of the trade, education, professional, and scholarly publishers, as well as distributors, wholesalers, retailers, manufacturers, service providers, and library leaders. And let us work tirelessly for racial and economic and environmental justice. Let our collective work lead to equity, diversity, and inclusion, social justice, and let our legitimacy be assessed on our commitment to that goal. And with that, I will introduce our opening panelists, offering examples of strategic EDI action plans from their various institutions. And in this order, April Powers, Angela Bole, Ellen Bush, and Andrea Weinzimer. So I'm going to ask them to speak, and they will pass the baton, torch, or mic to each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracie. Can you see my screen? Is that working? Are you?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, because I can only see my screen. So thank you all for having us. I think this is an incredibly important conversation to be having at this point in history for our human family. I am the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer for the SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators and Translators, but if we keep going with the acronyms, we won't stop. So I'm actually their first in their 50-year history, and they started the process well before any of the social justice issues started happening. And they have been doing a lot of amazing things already. And I wanted to start out this conversation with just the business case. And I know many of us know the business case, but a little bit of an insight into it. You know, Tracie just mentioned hire us. And when people think of the bookshelf, what I get a lot in my industry is I hear, well, there's no more room for me on the bookshelf, so I should just give up. There's no space for me here. It doesn't look like editors and publishers are interested in white stories or white creators anymore. And to that I say, no, the bookshelf is just expanding. But what I know to be true is that when you lift up all voices and you increase diversity, equity, and inclusion, what happens is everyone benefits. And if you don't benefit, that the impact on the majority is so slim that it doesn't really justify not doing it. And so this is a study from HBR that we've had access to for some time. And if you just look at it, if you remember nothing else from my talk, the impact on underrepresented minority people, and I should stop saying minority, I want to say underrepresented because we've been minoritized. And you'll see on my next slide how much words matter, is that the impact to white men is so low, but the impact also increases for white women when you do things and programs that impact underrepresented people in your field. And we know that diverse groups tend to perform better. So if you want to be on a winning team, the portfolio is always diversified, right? So we are looking at things from a global perspective. We're not just looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion from what's happening in the United States. Our growth is going to be global. So in that sense, we have to think of global language, global inclusion, what inclusion plus means for your organization. It could be caste, it could be colorism, it could be indigenous and native peoples, it's certainly language. And we're looking at our own language. Today is International Pronouns Day. I invite everyone to display their pronouns next to their names on signatures, on email, on your Zoom, right? Kind of like what I'm doing right now. We are translating a lot into Spanish right now. So Spanish, we know from surveys, is our second most spoken language at the SCBWI. So you'll see a number of our publications, including the book, will be partially translated into Spanish. We're going to be having Spanish language sessions. We're leaning a lot into translation and acknowledging translation as its own art form, that you give a book to 5 different translators, you will end up with 5 different books. We also want to create a standard at the SCBWI. We're looking at our language, and we've looked at every single publication for gender neutrality to make sure it's also not, using words like dark instead of mysterious or crazy. We're replacing that with things like frazzled or, other words that are a lot more sensitive. Language, we're also including accessibility, closed captioning, ASL, and looking at words like own voices and authenticity reader and swapping those out for lived experience and expert reader. We are training everyone, anyone who has access to our 30,000 approximate members has to get training around inclusion. And that means, how are you talking to people? Are we thinking about our unconscious biases as well as some of the things that we're saying that might make people feel marginalized, or maybe, microaggressions towards them, and definitely some cross-cultural competence. And this training will include everyone, including our board members and volunteers and staff. And that's a really important part of what we're doing. What we look at, though, the number one thing is numbers. So we've taken some surveys, but now what we're going to be doing is completely changing our membership profile page so that people can self-identify, and we're going to count them. We're documenting all the activities that we do because you treasure what you measure. And if you don't start now, you won't know how far you've come. If you are looking at where am I going industry-wise, the growth is in the areas that you haven't yet tackled, and the voices from those areas are going to matter a lot. So making sure that you're inviting those people. We're looking at historically Black institutions, Hispanic serving, and Native American institutions for here in the US. And we're really reaching out and talking to all of our international members so that we can have programs and programming that impact them in the ways that they want it to, because we're asking the questions. You can invite people to the party, but they're not always going to want to stay. So we're really leaning into, we'll start launching programs and workshops next year that speak to artists and creators that are underrepresented, and making sure that we have grants for them to be able to join. And I'm happy to answer any questions that people have, but for now I'm going to introduce Angela with IBPA to talk about what they're doing there.
Thank you, April. Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Bole with the Independent Book Publishers Association. I'm the CEO here at IBPA, and I'm really happy to be able to have this opportunity to participate in today's town hall. And I wanted to echo what Andrea said. I certainly don't come with any pretense of being an expert in this space, but as someone who's worked to lead a book industry association with an extremely diverse membership base of over 3,600 independent publishers through several important DEI conversations. So I'm happy to share a little bit about what I've learned along the way. And I like structure. I know some of you, and you know that about me, but I don't know how to do slides. There we go. So I'll acknowledge that we were told coming into this meeting that there were 3 goals, which were on the screen, and I decided to insert my own goal, which is my keep it real goal, or the goal to acknowledge roadblocks to the process. Because if we're talking about the development of strategic plans within associations, again, with very diverse membership base, we have to acknowledge these conversations aren't always easy, and the conversations within IBPA around issues of DEI haven't always been easy. And I don't think it makes sense to pretend that they have been, or even that they still are, or that they will be. These tensions that we experience here are something that our DEI consultant, a guy named Dr. James Pogue, I invite you guys to look him up. He's great. He calls this the right kind of uncomfortable. So perhaps we're all going to feel a little bit of that right kind of uncomfortable today, as I quickly, in a super rapid fire way, highlight some potential roadblocks to progress. I've called this the 4-minute case study on IBPA's DEI plan. So here we go. We have to kind of start back in April of 2019 when IBPA's board hosted an annual strategic planning meeting. And during this meeting, the board set goals for membership, advocacy, and eliminating bias. These goals were not what I call imaginative, if you're in the association world. At the highest level, these are simply what an association does and should do. For example, serve current members, add new members, and advocate for whatever vertical you work in. Very, very high level stuff. But 2019 was a unique year in that Lee and Lowe had just rerun their widely known diversity baseline study from 2015. And they had updated the data, but they showed that this updated data identified very little progress over the intervening 4 years. So this really piqued the interest of the IBPA staff and board of directors and led to the addition of a 4th goal to our overall plan, which is to eliminate bias and enhance diversity. And I mention all this because it illustrates a best practice as far as I can tell, and as we've worked through, which is to take the time to agree on your high-level goals organization-wide, and for the time being, consider calling out a specific goal related to DEI. Eventually, and we've talked about this a lot in IBPA meetings, internal meetings, we want to be able to eliminate this goal as a standalone pillar within our strategic plan and simply approach all things within the association with a DEI lens. But until that becomes possible, we have to call it out as a standalone goal and keep it front and center so we don't lose focus. So from August 2019 to June 2020, we were happily chipping away on our 4 goals, as an association does, when the social unrest across the country started boiling over, and we felt compelled to publish and circulate to our members what we called Reflections on This Moment, which was our commitment to stand with the IBPA community against injustice and racism in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Also in 2020, in June of 2020, the IBPA board launched a DEI task force, which was a subset of the board tasked with developing a formal DEI plan for the association. And nearly half the sitting board joined the task force. There was good support, but I'll talk about some of these roadblock impediments in a second. That were kind of chipped away a little bit at that half the sitting board joining the task force. So following 3 months of work, the task force was able to publish a DEI plan. So just to give you a sense of timeline, talking about 3 months of conversation, and the plan was buttressed by an overall IBPA commitment to fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion within its membership, leadership, policies, practices, and publications. So I say all of those words because if you don't think each one of those words is deliberately included in the commitment statement, you have not participated in consensus-driven development of plans, and you're very lucky. But each one of those things was very cleanly and clearly parsed out as we walked through the process. So IBPA was able to publish our DEI plan documents, which has a commitment, priorities, goals, strategies in September, so just last month. And I'm not going to go through that. These are some of the things on the screen. You're welcome to download and copy and paste what makes sense to you, or use it as templates or guidelines. All of that is available. What I wanted to do here, though, is just acknowledge some of these, again, the potential roadblocks that might have gotten in our way so that we wouldn't have gotten to the place where we could publish this plan. So I'll give you some clicks on what I experienced those were. And then we'll jump to Beth or to Ellen Bush at AU Presses and perhaps answer some questions in Q&A. So here are some of the things over 3 months that kind of tripped us up and got in our way a little bit. One was not having the confidence to start. It took us a month of conversation where we just told each other over and over, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to have this conversation or do this work. It frustrated people. I would say, think about that and don't worry so much. Just put something out there. Just get started. You can always have a DEI consultant like we did. We hired somebody at the end of process, come through, walk through, check it up for you. But don't fall victim to imposter syndrome. The other problem we had, attempting to solve problems before identifying them. We very much wanted to do something right away. Let's have a coffee hour. Let's have let's do this. Let's organize this. Let's, put out a call for the board before identifying whether that was an actual problem and putting it in as part of our goals to solve that problem, before doing the research that we had to do to survey our membership, the stuff that April was talking about. We had to do all of that research before we could put it in a plan. The other thing was attempting to reinvent the wheel. We spent 5 meetings talking about what the definition of diversity is. It is irrelevant what we think it is. There are organizations out in the world that have already identified it and that do this work, so you can find those definitions and apply them. Starting with a straw man proposal, not starting with a straw man proposal, we had to draft an entire plan for them to look at before we could even talk about it. And that's a big job to do, but I think you have to start with a straw man. I have to throw some props to Tom Clarkson, formerly of Barnes & Noble, who taught me all about strawman proposals, for those of you in the BISG audience. 2 more. This one is parsing words. I absolutely agree that words matter, but I don't think saying 6 when you could say half a dozen matters. And we spent a lot of time talking about words that weren't going to move the dial on the plan. And the last one is mission fatigue. So this is a sprint. I'm sorry, this is not a sprint. It is a marathon, but we're getting a lot of mission fatigue to get this point. So in June, when everything was boiling over and there was a lot of unrest, we had a ton of interest. People are now starting to fall back into their own lives, and you have to figure out how to keep people motivated and continuing on with this process once the plan is developed. And I think that's the stage where we're at now. We've got a good, solid plan. We need to continue to consider how to keep people motivated and moving forward. So I'd be happy to talk through all of this, and I always love talking about roadblocks and how to avoid them. So if anybody wants to talk in Q&A, I'd be happy to. But at this point, I want to toss it over to our colleague at AU Presses, who I said in our call yesterday has been doing some really impressive work. Ellen Bush is the chair of the Equity, Justice, and Inclusion Committee at AU Presses. And Ellen, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Angela. I was really glad to hear somebody talk about roadblocks. That's so important. Let's see if I can. Sorry. All right, here we go. I want to start out with a little background on our committee to give you a better understanding of where Association of University Presses is coming from and how we're approaching DEI work. As an organization comprised of publishers of scholarly work, much of which is in the humanities, many of us spend our regular work days producing work that looks critically at race, class, gender, systems of oppression, colonization. And so informed by that scholarship that we all work on regularly, AU Press is committed to an explicitly anti-racist and justice-oriented approach to increasing equity and inclusion at our presses within the organization and across scholarly publishing. AU Presses began with a couple of task forces that conducted some surveys and made recommendations for some immediate action and some longer term action and commitments. And they eventually led to what is now the Permanent Equity, Justice, and Inclusion Committee, which is now in its second year. So I'm going to share three sort of large themes that sort of guide our work and some ways that we are taking action in each of those areas. One, build a learning community and commit to long-term institutional transformation. We're dealing with institutionalized systems of exclusion, and it requires institutional and systematic transformation. It's not going to come from checklists and to-do lists. So we're developing, we're following up on professional development activities like training, specifically racial equity training. And we're creating platforms for ongoing communication so that it is not event oriented. These are ongoing channels of communication where we can have regular ongoing dialogue. Bring equity conversations into all spheres of work. Don't silo DEI work. It doesn't belong just to the committee. It's work that has to be done by everybody in an organization in order for it to actually be transformative for your organization. One of my colleagues on the committee, Stephanie Williams, who is director at Wayne State University Presses, suggested that our committee needs to be talking to every other committee that works with AU Presses. And so we are doing that now monthly. For each monthly meeting, we are bringing in somebody from another committee and talking about spending time, talking about something that's come up in their committee, talking about ways that we can collaborate on creating webinars. And this is developing healthier relationships within the organization, and also helping everybody learn to start these conversations in the arenas in which they're working. We're also developing tools growing from the Lee and Low baseline survey that Angela mentioned, to use that as a starting point for us. And we are taking some of the metrics that they have measured and developing tools to measure those on an ongoing basis. And they are things that have not been measured by the organization and by many presses in the past. And so we're developing some tools and protocols and best practices for how to implement that and how to solicit voluntary information regarding relationships within an organization, relationships with vendors and peer review and authors we work with, and tracking career progress and outcomes of people within our organizations. Number 3, establish relationships of trust and methods of accountability. The most important thing I think in doing equity work is establishing relationships of trust. I don't think equity can happen without that. And so that's going to require opportunities for feedback, which at times will be uncomfortable. But take those opportunities as moments for personal, interpersonal, and organizational growth. And keep in mind that traditional hierarchies of power and management are not going to be what defines how the success of your equity work. You must remain accountable to those who have traditionally been excluded from these tools of power. And I'll close with just a reminder that trust is something that has to be earned every day. It's one act of doing something for DEI is not the be all and end all to establishing a community of equity. And it's something that you have to practice every day. And there will be failures and recoveries, and that's part of having relationships. I've got some links that will be in my slide deck that you'll have access to after the program. I want to draw attention particularly to the anti-racism toolkit for allies that's been developed by in partnership with a coalition for diversity and scholarly publishing. And it is the first of 3 toolkits. They'll be developing one for underrepresented people working in overwhelmingly white institutions, and one for organizations. The first toolkit is for individual allies. And thank you. And with this, I will pass it on to Andrea Weinzimer at Hachette.
Hello, very nice to be here. I really appreciate being invited. So basically, I'm going to springboard off of all of my fellow panelists and get into a little bit more tactile – that's silly – tactical work that we're doing at Hachette. And we have 5 focus areas, and we base these areas on an anonymous focus group survey we did with an outside DEI consultant that we engaged. And we really have been listening to our staff, and we have a lot of work to do. And we're starting to do a lot of work. And we just got off of having 6 town hall meetings with our CEO. And these are the 5 areas we spoke about: leadership, recruitment and hiring, culture and retention, publishing, and community. I'm not going to go through each bullet on all these 5 slides because that will be boring, and some of them are very self-explanatory. What I want to focus on the leadership slide is we really are committed to the Rooney Rule. We have been, and then there's been some exceptions, but we really need to focus on it, as my colleagues here said, on mid-level and senior level roles. If we don't make traction there, we can bring in all the more junior hires we want to, and that's an easier fill for us. But it's when we want to get to the mid and senior levels, and I'll talk about that more when I get to recruitment.
Andrea,
yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you're referring to slides that we may not be seeing right now.
Do you not see the leadership slide?
No, it's maybe just try to share your slides again.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just want to make sure people have
No,
access to
I appreciate that. Oh my gosh, I should never be allowed to do these things.
That's not at all the case.
Yeah.
We're glad to have you.
Yeah, I am just not the best at this. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Let's see, is that working?
Yes, it is.
Great.
Thank you.
My
Appreciate it.
apologies, everybody. Clearly, I'm not an IT, and that's a really good thing. Really good thing. Okay, so we'll just stick with it the way it is so that I don't make any more mistakes here. Anyway, we started doing training for all managers, all employees, really. And that's going to be ongoing. It's every year. And I think, as someone else was saying on the panel, it's never a one and done. We have to continue to do. We can't just check a box on any of these things. A big change for us is having diversity goals in our performance appraisals. and they will be tied to compensation for our senior level executives and directors. So that's a big change for us, and we need to find ways to measure it. This 2021 will be the first year we do it, so we'll probably have to make some adjustments along the way. Senior management outreach is something that we've been doing for the last 3 years, and that's thanks to our fellow panelist, Mike, who many of you have not heard from yet, but you will. He came to speak to our senior leadership team and talked about getting away from the office, getting outside, meeting people, being part of the community. And it's really paid off, and it's really been very enlightening for our senior staff. Let me just go to the next page. Recruitment and retention is a really big one, and as other people said, like, you have to have goals, you've got to measure yourself against those goals, but big things we're trying to change now is our job descriptions. How do those read? Are we being inclusive? Are we really writing those descriptions in a way that opens it up to more people? So do you really need to have a certain educational requirement? Do you really need to come from this industry? Those are things we're stepping back and asking ourselves. We're creating new templates, and every time we have an open job, we're reviewing that open job with the manager, and we're asking tough questions, and they're asking themselves tough questions. We're training managers on interview techniques to combat unconscious bias. What are the questions you're asking? Should you be asking those questions, or are there different questions to ask? We're looking beyond the places we're currently located. We were always very sort of committed to, if you're in New York, the job is in New York, you should be in New York. And we all know, unfortunately, because of COVID, that that's not necessarily the case. So we can find people from different backgrounds, from different locations that are less expensive than a New York City area, or Boston, or Berkeley. And I think we can expand our pool of candidates that way. In terms of our onboarding programs, and I think this is just a really important slide, that's why I'm sort of sticking with it. We really are taking a harder look on how we're bringing people on board for success. So it's not just, you're here, this is great, did you meet the people in your department? It's making sure that someone has a buddy when they're hired immediately. It's making sure that in 3 months they're matched up with a mentor if they like that. It's making sure there's a checklist for managers, and we go over it with them, and we check in with the employee and the manager regularly. So if things are veering off, we can bring them back on track. Associates program is fairly self-explanatory. Informational recruiting sessions, we want people to know about us, we want people to know about this industry. So we're getting out there, we're going to places we hadn't typically gone before, we're opening things up to a broad array at all different levels. We've opened up to LinkedIn info sessions, so people who are much further along in their careers who may want to pivot into publishing can, as well as people who are in high school, as well as we are partnering with places like Included, and Mike will talk about that again. Cleo, I'm a friend of Michael's. For culture retention, we have shared our metrics. We'll be sharing them every year with our staff. Committees are ongoing. Our mentoring program is being expanded, and we're going to be rolling out reverse mentorship. We have business employee resource groups. We conduct an anonymous focus group survey, which is where we get a lot of information, and we have, I think, a spreadsheet that we're working on that has at least 40 different initiatives, and that all, to a great extent, came from that, as well as our focus groups internally. We're doing this training, as I said, for all staff, but with the training, we're also making sure that any training we do, including our management training, including our workplace conduct training, has a thread of DEI, so that it, again, we're constantly reinforcing. I think if you all remember, years ago, we said we need to make diversity a way of life, and it became very organic. We need to do the same thing in this arena. We need to make it a way of life. We need to make it a way that people are comfortable asking questions, being called out, course correcting. We're expanding our communications. As I said earlier, we had a town hall. We had 6 of them. We had small group discussions. We are having newsletters that are going out. We're having annual meetings to talk about these topics. So we want to be front and center. We're updating our intranet site, and we're listening to suggestions from employees, because it's really important that we get this right, and it speaks to the people who we're affecting. On the publishing side, we're doing the same thing. We're getting numbers. We're finding out what we're publishing, who our authors are, who our marketers are. We want to make sure that we can track, that we can grow, and that we know when we're getting better or when we're flatlining. I think someone mentioned the Lee and Lowe survey, and there wasn't much movement. Well, what you measure will change, particularly in our company, because we're all committed to it. And we're excited about it. And I think it gives publishers a great challenge, and we're seeing great strides already. We're planning to launch new imprints and programs. And again, this is a great opportunity, and it's a business case too, right? There's a huge population that we're not tapping, and shame on us for talking about it for years and not doing it. And then finally on community, we do donations. We've done a huge donation to libraries, school libraries recently, of about 210,000 reads for books on social justice and anti-racism. We're increasing our donations, and we're looking for ways to continue to do that and find organizations that we think are worthy and that are important and speak to our colleagues and our accounts. Expanding our commitment to social justice programs, and then importantly, getting a sense of our supplier diversity. We didn't do an inventory of that. We have 1,800 suppliers, and now we're looking into see, okay, do they qualify as emerging business enterprises, as minority business enterprises? If not, what is the process to get them there? Who are the other suppliers we should be looking at? So it's a very all-encompassing program. We're excited about it. We're shifting things. It's new for us to be so programmatic, but I think people want to hear specifics, and we're trying to provide that for our staff. And the board is very committed. We have subcommittees that are very committed. And I think our staff is seeing some progress. Again, a long way to go, but I feel like we're moving, and that's so important. And I think we all agree that we just need to move in a direction, and we will fall and we'll pick ourselves up. We will course correct and we will move forward again. So thank you for listening. And with that, I'm going to introduce Nicole Johnson from We Need Diverse Books. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, did that work for everybody?
Yes.
Awesome. So first off, good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about We Need Diverse Books and our approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. WNDB exists to put more diverse books in the hands of all children, and we imagine a world where every child can see themselves in the pages of a book. We provide a range of resources for educators, librarians, parents, and we also work with diverse creatives and publishing professionals who embrace our vision for children's literature. WNDB has three key stakeholders. First, readers. Educators, librarians, parents, and young people themselves are the primary advocates for diverse books. Educators and librarians are seeking titles that they can share with their students in the classroom, and parents want to help affirm their child's identity or develop empathy for the experiences of others. And as the United States demographics shift, today's young people and the generations that follow expect diversity. And they want diverse experiences represented and diverse experiences and identity represented across genres and media. Our second stakeholder group, diverse creatives, authors, and illustrators. And our definition of diversity recognizes a range of diverse experiences, including but not limited to LGBTQIA, Native, people of color, gender diversity, people with disabilities. And we hold a very broad definition when it comes to people with disabilities, ethnic, cultural, and underrepresented religions. And then our third stakeholder group are industry professionals. And we are focusing on professionals from all segments: editorial, sales, marketing, finance, literary agencies, librarians, booksellers, the full range. And we work in partnership with publishing professionals and companies to reshape hiring for entry-level positions, to rethink their approach to working with diverse creatives, and to expand efforts to market and promote diverse books. Our blog and social media channels are open for cover reveals, author Q&As, and profiles and giveaways. So I'll take the next couple minutes just to tell you a little bit more in depth kind of how our approach to this works. So many of WNDB's programs and partnerships are designed to disrupt the publishing bias and mythology that surrounds diverse representation. Those myths and biases exist on the demand side. Books with diverse characters don't sell. People aren't interested in these books. I'm not sure I can market this book. They also exist on the supply side. Diverse creatives are hard to find. I'm not sure we can find a writer that matches our needs. And amongst the decision makers themselves, the publishing industry struggles to hire diverse candidates, often saying they don't apply, or in the case of entry-level positions, not being able to afford to pay interns. And so to disrupt these beliefs and assumptions, we intentionally center diversity. Our outreach and promotion targets diverse or provides resources and support to diverse creatives We try to amplify their work and the socioeconomic and political issues that they care about. We are constantly learning and shifting what that means for our followers and what it means for WNDB as an organization. But we know we've tapped into demand. We know that there is a groundswell of interest, expectation, and desire for diverse books. Our giveaways have a long wait list. Often we just recently, even in the COVID moment, teachers are expecting and hoping to receive diverse books. And in some cases, these are books that are not on their quote unquote approved list for reading. And so they are bringing them in on their own with their own resources. And so we're really trying to figure out the best way to support them. And you can see in the growth of our social media channels that there is a growing demand to know what diverse books are out there, what authors are out there, and how folks can access these titles. So this is a year-over-year comparison of our social media work on Facebook, our social media presence on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We work to support and celebrate diverse creatives, challenging the belief that they are hard to find or market. We facilitate an annual mentorship program and grants program for unpublished writers and illustrators. We connect debut writers and artists with experienced creatives to refine their work and demystify the publishing process. And we host the Walter Dean Myers Award for Outstanding Children's Literature to recognize the work of diverse authors published each year. We know that the creatives are out there, and so we ask ourselves the question, what can we do to shine a light on their work and their accomplishments? And these are just some of the ways that we do that. And then lastly, we stay engaged with the industry. Through our internship grant program, we advocate for an end to unpaid internships and to bring more equity and access to the industry overall. We partner with publishers on diversity initiatives such as the Human Random House Creative Writing Awards or the Scholastic Book Clubs. And when invited, we will collaborate with library associations, publishers, and other parts of the industry to design training and work to advance their DEI efforts. All of that we do is not necessarily going to bring an end to long practice traditions, biases or assumptions, or just resistance to change. And so it's great to be a part of this conversation and to hear how folks on this call are already transforming the system from within. So I'd like to close with two quotes, one from author James Baldwin and one from author, Harvard academic Ron Heifetz. And in these two quotes, in their own way, they're describing the struggle and loss that comes from abandoning the status quo. In the opening remarks that Tracie offered, we're asking people to let go of hate, and if not hate, unjust behaviors. Like we're asking people to reorient a system that is designed to survive. And so to do that, there's going to be some struggle, discomfort. And so in order to create a world where every child can see themselves in the pages of a book, we must be willing to take risks, to do the thing that others say can't be done, and to be uncomfortable and to speak our truth. And it's really exciting. I'm looking at the chat and folks are talking about the BISAC and the orchid. I'm like, woo, this is awesome, this is amazing. So I'm just really looking forward to learning how at a systems level, at the infrastructure level, we can begin to partner and collaborate to make it work. So thank you. Now Michael from Included and Writers.
Michael, before you begin, I'm going to just mute everybody so that we can eliminate some of the background noise that people are hearing and commenting on. And then if you could unmute yourself.
All right.
Okay. Go ahead and you should be able to speak now.
All right. Well, thank you all for
Michael?
I think Michael got muted.
Let me start.
You're still muted.
Yep.
No, you're not.
There you are.
I think we're having a couple of issues with connectivity, not necessarily with the muting that we did a moment ago. Just take a minute and we'll see if we can get him back.
Here. Can I
What?
help you?
Yeah. No,
Yep, you're unmuted.
I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Michael. Sorry about that.
Fantastic. Fantastic. This is Erica, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
My lifesaver. But what are you doing
I
here?
was going to put your pronouns in.
All right. Yeah, thanks. Give me one more second. Want to just delay this a little longer. All right. So I'm going to tell a little story. And it starts this way. It was right after the election. And my colleagues and I felt our core little values were under assault, very specifically around the issues of diversity, inclusion, and representation. What did it mean that America had elected an off-chain racist president? What did it mean that we worked in the industry with hiring practices that resulted in an overwhelmingly white majority? What did it mean that we were in an industry that omitted every other group's narratives, and in doing so supporting the myth that white is normal and that white speaks for everyone? To be clear for the record, it doesn't. And my colleagues and I, we didn't like any of the answers we had for each other. So we found it included. We found it included to take action against our sea of trouble. Now I want to take a quick step back because I'd be remiss in all of this if I didn't define we for this assembly. We is Andrea Morrison and Alexandra Hightower and Julia Carden. We is Mackenzie Brady Watson and Mary Dolly and Natalie Guerrero. And we is Veracana Mia Roman and Jenny Chen. This is why we, and we are included. We were founded in 2017 with the mission to advance diversity in publishing. Immediately got busy. This is some of the stuff we do. We present overviews of the book business to kids in grade school, to teens in high school, and university students. We raise thousands of dollars for like-minded groups. We host readings that showcase BIPOC authors. The thing that we do that best reflects our mission is our flagship program, Included Academy. Included Academy is an 8-week publishing course offered every summer to college graduates who are BIPOC. It's taught by a racially mixed faculty, and each day-long class covers a specific job in the publishing industry, including agenting, editorial, managing editorial production, subsidiary rights scouting, sales, marketing, and publicity, contracts, and royalties. It's a rigorous curriculum with comprehensive lectures, class participation, Q&A, in-class assignments, and homework assignments. The matriculants get feedback on all their work and ask to revise their assignments and then get more. Each matriculant is assigned to a mentor who advises and supports them both throughout and beyond the program. We provide career counseling, do cover letter, resume, and interview work, and write many recommendations in support of their hire. Included Academy is free, and the matriculants receive a stipend. We've graduated 2 classes at this point, and we've placed all but one of the matriculants in our first class. And all the graduates of our second class will be participating in a paid externship with a major publishing interest starting on Monday. But let's be clear, it's our intention to have all the graduates placed at full-time jobs by the end of the calendar year in 2021. Also in 2021, Inkluded will be announcing a series of master classes that we'll be doing in conjunction with a major university here in New York. These classes will be both instructional and have a BIPOC point of view. So yeah, we're going to instruct how to generate reader boards and pitch letters. We're going to instruct on P&Ls and how they're generated. But we're also going to carve out some time to talk about editorial publicity, sales, and marketing, and all of the challenges that surface when the players involved are BIPOC. With the few minutes that I have left, I want to talk about what you use to support what we're doing. For starters, and this is especially for Andrea, who does it, hire our graduates. Once they're hired, support their advancement. Just in general, hire BIPOC. And once they're hired, support their advancement. This next one's a little more complicated. Let's challenge and disrupt the requirement that the person has to be, whenever we're deciding on who to hire, that the graduate has to be from an Ivy League school or an expensive publishing program, or look like you, or be like you, or come from your hometown, or have hair like yours. They don't have to make you comfortable. They're not a sofa. And while you're at it, ask yourself why you have these requirements in the first place. I've made hundreds of successful hires in my career without ever needing to use any of the aforementioned as requirements for employment. Be a great colleague. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening is a great start. Ask for input. Not only do you profit from the ideas that are shared, but you are breaking the cycle of racism that is wholesale in ignoring BIPOC people in the workplace. Buy books written by BIPOC authors. The better they sell, the more they'll be published. Support these titles on social media. Participate in more events like this and be heard. The people who are on the panel with me want to amplify voices, but we need voices to amplify. That's where you come in. This is something we can all do. Use your influence in all the circles that you're in to advance the mission of equality, equity, diversity, inclusion, and representation. This is something you can do regardless of whether you're an intern, an assistant, or an associate. We're all big deals somewhere. Continue to put our feet in the fire. Don't let us slide with anything. And naturally, of course, I do run a 501c3. So give us money. We promise we won't spend it on candy. Thank you.
Michael, this is Brian. I had turned off your video while you were speaking with the hope that that would give you better bandwidth, but you were still distorting on the sound. I know we'll want to hear from you as we go into questions and answers. So if there's an alternative way to connect, that might be helpful.
Great.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
so much.
I'll try on my end.
Well, you sound better now, actually.
Thank you so much. I'm going to jump back in here, and Brian, I am going to ask that because our time is short, I'm going to ask that maybe we can do some trading off. Why don't I begin with one question that I had planned to ask our panelists, all of our panelists, all 6 of them, and then I'll go to you for a question generated. There's been so much, the chat is rich. A question coming from our attendees, and we'll go back and forth. That way we can maybe get 4 questions, 5 questions, maybe 3 from the audience and 2 that I prepared. How does that sound? All right.
That's
Okay.
great. No, that's great. Sorry, a little bit of trouble getting to my mute button.
No worries, no worries. So I definitely hope that everyone, many of us gathered here are committed to this work on an ongoing basis. And so I know that there are models and there are probably answers or thoughts on some of the questions that will be asked. And I'd love to encourage those of you listening to use chat to maybe take your own, try your own hand at these questions as well. Let's make sure that this is information rich. And I also think that by doing that, we also further commit ourselves to doing this work, and not doing this work when it's trendy or doing this work when it's like a good look, you know, but doing this work because we're committed to it and because we understand that our long-term sustainability of the industry is really contingent on our credibility and our ability to match the needs and the cultural production, intellectual production that is happening in the larger world. So with that said, I'm going to ask our panelists. All 6 of you have shared approaches and perspectives and models bent on fostering a good approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Are there organizations that you look to as aspirational models for the kinds of changes you want to see, or maybe for what might come next in your work? And I'm going to ask anyone who wants to jump in to answer first, and maybe we will hear from at least 3 of you.
I will say that I've been in this work for a long time. I was the head of inclusion for Nestle. I did similar work at Amgen, largest biotech. Nobody has this right. So, you know, what Angela was saying earlier, the imposter syndrome, the who's got it right, we don't want to mess up, we don't want to say the wrong thing. I think Glennon Boyle says it great in Untamed, you know, you just kind of have to take it sometimes and just go with it. You can't not do it right if you're not asking, if you ask questions, right? If I had to say people that we look to, we're looking to at We Need Diverse Books. We're looking to other organizations in the industry that are doing great work in this space, and we're leaning on them. I put it in the chat. We are totally stealing the We Need Diverse Books definition of disability. It's fantastic. I think you should too, and give them credit. We get ideas from everywhere, but nobody has it right. We're just all trying, and again, to say what Angela said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Please don't waste your time on that. Time is precious. There are other people doing some great things, and I think you do have to look at organizations like We Need Diverse Books and other kind of hidden, you know, worlds in there. Follow those hashtags and you'll find them.
Thanks, April. And someone else.
I was going to say, we absolutely follow We Need Diverse Books as well. And we did a lot of work trying to find a consultant that we could work with. And I put a link to him in the chat. I can put another one in, finding someone who could help foster the conversations, be in conversation with us, and help us to understand that we could stumble forward. Appreciate that that's okay, and that the things, you know, we needed to talk about with each other, that the space was okay and we could open that space. So just having somebody there was helpful to us. So I can put another link in there if you guys are looking for somebody that might want to work with your organization and has that, I think, a very open concept of how this works. You know, all voices welcome, perspectives welcome in safe space.
Thank you so much for that. Please put it in all resources and links. In librarianship, one of our rules is to save the time of the user. And so anything that can move us to action, let's do it. Let's get it in there. Anyone else want to jump in here?
Yeah, I'll just offer one. I want to appreciate everyone's engagement with WNDB. We work really hard at it, and I'm glad that what we provide is so useful and relevant for folks. But right now in my work, I'm really looking to an organization, Courageous Conversations About Race, Glenn Singleton's organization. They do race consciousness work in the education space. But they offer a really strong framework for how to have the difficult conversations. So less about the technical pieces of how to hire and how to put systems and structures in place, and much more about the relational pieces that sometimes get in the way. I think a lot of what Angela described as roadblocks are really the tensions that come up as people try to work through this. And I'm just in awe of Color of Change. So it's a national organization that has like 1 million members, and they are transforming the entertainment and media industry right now. Like they got Netflix, HBO, they're all like trying to get right. And so I really look to them, and a lot of the ways that they talk about this work when it comes to organizing and mobilization and industry transformation. They are some powerful advocates. Yeah.
Yeah, Nicole, I want to second that, because I think one of the things that we're seeing in media is the explosion of what some are considering to market, but markets that have been there and that haven't been given their just desserts. They haven't been given the stories or the narratives that were as complex as their life experience, as intersectional as their life experience. I think when we talk about aspirational models, I think you're spot on, Color of Change. Brian, why don't I move over to you and see what question you may have, and you can go ahead and read it, and we'll just ask anyone to jump in. I'm really hoping that our panelists that we haven't heard from might speak up first.
Sure. Well, there's one from Carolyn Pittis that actually dates back to about 625, following librarians' best practice. She was asking if anyone was familiar with Frida Poli's Pi Metrics, which essentially promotes gender and race-blind skills evaluation and matching. She's willing to say some more about it, but does anyone currently on the panel, have they used it or been exposed to it? I think we're seeing no. Carolyn, who's a good friend of BISG, maybe want to say a couple words about it, or your experience with it?
Well, I don't have deep experience, but I was so impressed about it when I saw it maybe half a decade ago. Frida Poli is a neuroscientist with many decades of work behind her, and she realized that using basic brain tests was, she sort of stumbled upon the fact that they could be used to point at the problem of increasing diversity in the workplace. She secured a contract with Unilever, which, as you probably all know, is one of the largest companies in the world, certainly in the United States. They've come a long way. Happy to talk about this offline with anybody who's interested. I could show you some of what they do based on the evaluation that I did when I was first interested. They came out of NYU. That's when I saw her, back in maybe 2013 or something like that. But it's a platform, it's a series of algorithms, and you take these tests that dramatically increase the number of women candidates that come forward, and dramatically increases the diversity of the candidates, which is just so exciting to see technology being used in a positive way. I think there are other platforms now that have come along since she first did her work, but the fact that she's a scientist, and these are very standard tests, they've been around for decades, I just thought it was worth mentioning. The name of the company is Pi Metrics, PYMETRICS.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And again, feel free to drop any information or link again into chat, and so that we can all check it out. And I'm hoping as well that we will save the transcript of the chat, because it is rich with questions and also with resources. So I'm going to move on to my second question, and then ask Brian to tee himself up for his second. We tend to focus on some kind of splicing two questions together. we tend to focus on book publishers, but it really is a larger industry and ecosystem with manufacturers and distributors and retailers, and of course, libraries and solution providers and tech. I really want to focus on, with that sort of thinking about that expansive sort of constellation of players, I want to focus on maybe your suggestions and any aspirational models, but your suggestions for, as many have talked about in chat, of creating workforce diversity programs, or I call it genius programs that really mine the full talent pool of genius in our regions, in our nation, and to think about that at the senior and mid-level, as opposed to thinking about it only at the level of maybe early career or fellowships or paid internships. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I know that in library and information services, architecture, and law, that even with some of the pipeline programs that we have, there seems to be a drop-off point or some type of turnstile in which people experience so many racialized microaggressions or microaggressions around other aspects of diversity and leave the field. So how do we begin to recruit and create space at the leadership level? Anyone want to take that on? And then anything else you might want to add just about such programs in general?
I have a go ahead, Angela.
I'll make it a little shorter because it'll be a little pitchy too, because I work for Independent Book Publishers Association, but I definitely want to talk about recruitment in the large publishing houses at the leadership level, but acknowledge that a lot of this work is being done in the independent publishing space and within independent publishing companies, where the executive in that place is the person running the business and doing the work, and they have been shut out of traditional publishing for a really long time and therefore have moved into independent publishing spaces. And I think traditionally the industry doesn't look enough at what's happening with smaller presses and presses that can do this work really well and really agile, in a really agile way, and are the leaders and the executives already. They're already kind of there. They're just not in this tiny little Big Five New York City centric space that's happening. So I'd like to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so two things. I have a recruiting background. So I'm going to come at this with a recruiting lens. The language in your job descriptions matters. I noticed that somebody said that they actually put BIPOC individuals encouraged to apply. That is super important. You can also put disabled, you can put LGBTQIA+. All of these things are really going to matter, because your organization, company, guild, whatever it is anti-racist and isn't homophobic or any of those things. Your organization is its own entity that just simply wants the best people to do that job. And so one of the things that we've seen, like with, in some organizations, people are stepping down and creating space and creating room. We're inviting, one of the things about diversity is diversity of thought. Like, I'm not from the publishing industry. I come from consumer product and somewhere else entirely. So I'm actually bringing a different lens and a different perspective. My diversity is not just me being a BIPOC woman. It's about me coming in with a different perspective for an industry that very much sometimes either cannibalizes itself or you keep hearing from the same echo chamber. So I encourage you to take parallel skills that can be used and weave those folks into your organization at higher levels. And you have to, at the internship level, you have to, at the associate level, have a living wage, or you will always get a certain class of people, and you won't expand your market because you won't have those voices there.
Hear, hear, April, especially, the idea that so many times entry points into professions almost cater to people who have maybe family resources or other types of resources that many don't. I want to just draw attention. I think it was Natalia who says, who echoed your thought that language counts. And Natalia did say that, you know, there are resources that are free that, you know, can help us when we're crafting job descriptions. Natalia, if there's something that you were thinking about and you wanted to point to, you want to drop it in
Tracie,
the chat, please
I
do so.
literally just posted a link to an article that gives you 4 free different resources where you can go ahead. I'm new to this audience. My name is Natalia Pedroza and I work for Wiley Publishing. And this is like the talent acquisition piece is, I'm working on 2 very clear pieces, inclusion and talent acquisition. And I'm saying them in that order intentionally. So look at that site, use the free resources because there's a lot of stuff out there that you can use without paying money. You just have to amplify those resources.
Natalia, thank you so much for that. Brian, oh, please.
Sorry, can
All
I
right.
add one thing?
Yes.
About diversifying your entry-level pool versus management level. The point of equity is to disrupt, frankly, white supremacist hierarchies. And that's going to require expanding the management table to include voices that haven't been included before. It's going to be recognizing that you have a, that you are missing some essential skills in your management team. So I just want to advocate for not waiting for diversity to trickle up. You gotta smash it from the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me jump in here.
Yes, please.
And piggyback on what Ellen said. That, and I hope everyone can hear me now. Forgive the tech issues. That there's the issue of human will. That whether we're talking top to bottom or bottom to top, the will simply has to be there. The will that has been absent for 500 years has to be there now, today, immediately, so that we're supporting our young people on the way up. And we're thinking out of the box the way we have many, many times before. It's not going to be the first time. It isn't going to be the Mercury Project the first time we think out of the box in publishing. Sans when it comes to hiring. We can go and recruit people outside of publishing. We have before, and we should be doing that to address the issue on that managerial, directorial level. At the same time, we should be aggressive in not only recruiting our young people, right, but supporting them, supporting their advancement, whether it's colleague to colleague, supervisor to junior employee. But all of those rivers really lead back to one ocean, the ocean of human will. And so the question that I posit to all of you is, where do we find that will? When do we arrive at it?
Thank you. Thinking of our time, I'm wondering, Nicole, if you wanted to jump in here. I know that we are going to have a couple of our leaders in the space close us out. So Nicole, do you want to jump in here and speak to this question or any of the others?
Yeah, I guess what I would add to what's already been shared is that it's a both and, right? So it's creating a space for interns or entry-level folks to come in and desire to stay in publishing. So a lot of what folks experience when they first start, you know, all the microaggressions, the being the only voice in the room, demanding a certain representation or having a particular take on a book, and just being exhausted by the extra work they have to do to represent and diversity, right? So that's definitely a part of the work. I think the assumptions that people make about who's ready and who's not ready, I think you all have already talked about that. Your job description, school background, educational background, all of those things are at play. Good old nepotism is at play, right? So folks want to support not necessarily family or familial nepotism. There's also academic nepotism, right? You want to go back to your alumni group. You want to go back to your university and recruit. So all of those things are at play when you think about the barriers for entry level positions. And I think that, the other thing that this summer, we did a boot camp with our intern grant recipients. And one of the publishing professionals that spoke with them in talking about this mid-level piece is that if we wait for all the entry-level folks to matriculate up, it'll be decades before there's any significant change in the industry. And so if we're really going to reach a critical tipping point when it comes to representation behind the scenes, there has to be a willingness to bring people from outside and support people as they come in at the entry level, right? It has to be a both and in order to really make a difference. And so that's what I'll offer in terms of this question of mid-level and entry level. It all matters. I think the other way to think about it too is it just not, that piece matters not just on the industry side, it also matters on the creative side. So one of the things that we are learning is that there's so much focus on the new writer, right? The new diverse voice. And there are many mid-list authors out there who aren't getting the same access, aren't getting the same recognition, aren't getting the same sort of retention in their career that they deserve. And so there's also this bias toward the new, this bias toward the entry versus, really looking at the entire pipeline and creating support and infrastructure for all creatives, for all professionals as they move through, because they need different things. And, how does the industry really respond to that? Because there would be more people present if you gave everyone the same level of support, whether it's marketing support or, that next book or, recognition for the award they just won, right? A person can win a Coretta Scott King Award and then people forget who they are. It's like, how does that happen? Like, that's crazy. But yeah, those are my closing thoughts, I guess.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm going to get ready to call Kathleen in here. And I just want to note that while you were talking and others were talking, there were at least 7 new resources and comments. This chat has been extraordinary. And again, I'm asking for the transcript because I think it is so rich. I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen. I want to thank our panelists. You have been excellent. I love that this conversation has been about action and really focus on action and focus on models and not deliberating over the nuances and semantics of notions of diversity. But and so I really honor that. And I want to honor each of the panelists and the work that you are doing. And those of you who have been writing in about the work you are doing. Thanks again. Thank you all. And let's keep moving it forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. I've been taking notes this whole time, trying to kind of capture the various themes. And or am I still muted? Or can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I have been taking notes and kind of trying to keep up with all the great information. I'm excited to check out all the links too. And I think, in terms of themes, from the beginning, I really enjoyed the kickoff and really looking at the ROI for diversity and inclusion. Really, it's not only the right thing to do, but it's good for business. I mean, there are real business reasons to solve this problem as an industry. And really just to get started, there's no day like today to stumble forward. I loved that term. And really looking across not only our workforce, but our suppliers, our authors, the peer review process, holistically looking across the supply chain to ensure that inclusion is not something that is just a project or a committee, that is checking boxes, but really changing the culture and looking across all aspects of the business. I also appreciated the fact that traction needs to be made at the mid-level and high levels, not just an entry level or an internship programs, but that we really need to look outside our industry and maybe there's within the various functions of an organization, there's absolutely no reason why you need to have publishing experience, to work in finance or in distribution and a number of different areas of the business that are not specific to, publishing as an industry, but are functional areas. I loved the discussion on the various aspects of recruitment and how we actually describe our positions. That is something that we're doing in our organization as well, to really review those job descriptions and be more explicit about our openness to all applicants and in particular our excitement about a diverse applicant pool. I'm very interested in learning more about Inkluded. I had difficulty hearing your voice, Michael, but I'm definitely interested in learning more about that program and following up too. So I found this very, very exciting, and I'm really interested in checking out all of the resources that everyone shared. This has been a great discussion, and I appreciate all of the speakers. Any other trends that I missed on this in terms of, there's so much that we discussed, so lots of follow-up.
Yes, thank you so much, Kathleen. We're going to now ask the great Kelvin Watson to close us out.
Yeah.
So man, I get the tough job here, but I'm glad that everybody hung on, and in listening to this conversation, and thinking about my 23 years in the industry, from working at Ingram as a supplier to Borders on the retail side, and then in libraries. So I've been a part of the supply chain for many, many years, and Nicole really touched on a lot of things that I've felt over the years, being the only voice in the room a lot of times. But I want to thank everybody for doing this real work around diversity, equity, and inclusion in the book supply chain, and taking concrete actions like those we've heard about tonight from our speakers and our colleagues across the industry. I am truly inspired by what I've heard tonight, and all the comments and the thoughts and just the sharing. We all know there's a lot more work to be done, and many opportunities for new leaders to rise to the challenges that we face. We need a new paradigm shift. We need a paradigm shift, a culture of change, and clearly not a culture of complacency, which we've actually been doing for many, many years. As Andrew said at the top of the program, BISG is here to serve the industry, convening important conversations and collaborating with willing partners, amplifying the voices and work of others in this industry online, at events like this town hall, and one day in real life, and offering guidance, some best practices, which we heard about tonight, and solutions to improve the industry for everyone. It's everyone. We're all in this together. So this town hall meeting has been and is a productive start towards a worthy goal. There's no doubt in my mind that we can accomplish anything that we set out to do. Not talking about it, not thinking about it, but making it happen, and making DEI a way of life rather than just a way of thinking is worth every minute that we devote to it. As mentioned, we'll publish the highlights of what we heard tonight, which will likely form the foundation for BISG for further exploration and problem solving by those in the industry willing to take them on. And they may inform further research and development by BISG, our member companies and partners in the industry. But I wanted to say that my personal approach to problem solving is this. And Tracie's known me for many years, so she'll recognize this. Let's not commiserate about it. Let's solve it. Let's obliterate it. Let's get this done. We welcome your feedback on this program, invite you to join BISG committees and working groups, your contributions, and ask that you reach out to BISG when you need our help and our assistance. This is a journey that I cannot wait to embark on with all of you. I thank you, and I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you, Kelvin. And thank you, everyone who joined us. This was a fantastic evening. Really appreciate it. And Brian, did you have anything else to add? Or if not, I think we can formally thank everyone for joining us and look forward to the next conversation.
Agreed. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you everybody who's participated, not just the panelists today, although their contributions are immense, but also everybody who contributed resources and thoughts throughout the conversation tonight.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Julie, for your help in pulling this event together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, Julie. Thanks, everybody. And again, have a great night.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. See you tomorrow.
We will.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.